Okay, the last grouping for our animal kingdom is the deuterostomes, those whose blastular opening forms the anus as opposed to the mouth. And we have two phyla, the Echinodermata and the Chordata, that we'll talk about in this presentation. So, phylum Echinodermata includes marine sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, feather stars, sea lilies, and sand dollars. Uh, Sand dollars, probably you've seen sand dollars. Chances are good that if you haven't been to the beach and picked up your own, you've seen somebody else's somewhere. Okay, so also marine sea stars. This is what I grew up as a kid with these being called starfish, and you may have two. Again, that's a kind of a colloquial term, I think, or at least an older term that hangs on in some areas. It's not a fish, so we've tried to change the term to sea star. Okay. Um, do I have pictures? Probably not. Okay. Uh, I have, this is my short presentation. I have a longer presentation on these, believe it or not, that I think I cut some pictures out to try to shorten things down for printing purposes of printing the notes off. Uh, and so if you can think of the sand dollar, it's rough. You can think of the starfish, it's spiny, right? That's what echinoder means. It means spiky skin. Derm is skin. So you kind of spiky or spiny skin. And so here we have the exoskeleton still, calcium rich, and that forms spines and plates and makes the body covering the exoskeleton very rigid and rough and sometimes, yeah, spiky. With these, we have radial symmetry. Okay, so you go back and look at your symmetry types if you don't know what that is as adults, but the larval form is bilateral. And a water vascular system is unique to this phylum. So we had some hydrostatic, hydraulic type structures in some of the other groups, but this water vascular system is different and unique. Okay, uh, so starfish has arms. So example here. Okay, those five kind of arms sticking out. Lives in oceans along coastlines. Feeds on clams and oysters, and it uses those arms to open up those clam and oyster shells. And if you've ever tried to open even one of our freshwater mussel shells up around here, those bivalves talked about earlier, uh, you have to really pry on those things to get them open. Typically, they're pretty strong. So that is that water vascular system is what they use to open these up. The mouth is on the underside, and the anus is on the top of the body. Uh, It has these five arms that have a groove down each of the arms, and that's lined by tube feet, which are kind of like section caps almost. They help open up the clam. And then this mouth being on the underside, the central ventral stomach, ventral being stomach, underside, right? Okay, in the center, that where all the arms come together, that radius in the center, that is where the stomach is located, and it just everts it into the clam, and the food's digested externally. Okay. Uh, Always one of the cool and neat things about starfish, right? We can reproduce asexually here at this with this organism. If a arm um, is lost, it can regrow. Okay, it can regenerate that arm. Now, my understanding is that a section of this arm broken off doesn't go regrow a whole nother starfish, though. Okay, the starfish can regrow the broken arm. The broken arm only if it contains part of that central radius, that central disc, the body. Um, then that could. Okay, so and I wish I had a picture up here, and I didn't. Okay, I need to do that. I need to get a picture back in here. The five. Go find a picture of a starfish. Just Google it, okay? After I'm talking about this, you can see. Uh, if you look at the arms, they come together and they make kind of a little almost a triangle shape, a little groove or indentation on that central disc of the starfish. And they all come to these little points, okay, and almost like diamond shaped points in a sense. So if you were to cut the starfish along those diamond lines, at least this is what I'm told, and I've read it in the past. It's been a long time, but it's from at the time reputable sources. So I don't think I was being led astray. But if you cut along those sections there and you get a portion of that central radial disc with the arm, then that section is able to grow a whole nother starfish. So say starfish gets bitten in half by a predator. Okay. Uh, and for some reason the predator gets disturbed or whatever and drops the half it bit off. Both of those are going to contain enough of the section the sections of the radial disc to easily grow new starfish. Both of them. Okay. Uh, according to that description. But the advantage really to the starfish is not to propagate itself that way, is to make two out of one, or if you cut, there's five, if you cut it perfectly, ideally, theoretically, you get five new starfish. Uh, the advent the advantage here, why this is advantageous evolutionarily and survival wise, is that the predator can take part of the starfish. The starfish can escape and regrow the missing part of its body to go ahead and continue living and reproduce and that sort of thing. Okay. So they do reproduce sexually with release of eggs and sperm. And if an egg and sperm unites, it's going to form a zygote that will grow into this bilateral larva that's not radially symmetrical. And then that will metamorphose into the adult. Okay. Last phylum, okay, of the 9 we talked about. Now, I have to emphasize this again. I'm not sure how, I don't remember. It's been a few days since I recorded the first lecture on this. I don't remember how much I emphasized that there were 34 phyla, and we chose 9. Okay. So that means there's 25 other phyla out there we haven't even talked about. And of all of the creatures I've mentioned, can you think of anything not covered yet, other than mammals and the chordates we're going to talk about? And there's some really strange animals in this chordate group. What the heck is in those other 25 phyla anyway? Huh. Yeah, interesting, right? Okay, so finally to our last phylum. This is the phylum we are in, and there are 3 basic characteristics that all chordates have in common. At least at some point in their life, they have these 3. So they may not have all 3 at the same time. Okay. May not have all 3 at the same time. They may have one, it may lose it and gain the other 2, or vice versa, or any combination thereof. Okay, so, but if they've got these 3 at any point in their life, you can check them off. Well, here they had that, and there they've got this, and yeah, then they're able to be classified as chordates. So first, they have to have a dorsal notochord, and that's going to be located just below the nerve cord. And then in an adult vertebrate, that's going to be replaced by the vertebral column. Okay. Not all chordates are vertebrates. All right. We'll get to that. Dorsal hollow nerve cord, and that's going to be found above the notochord. And then the third thing is pharyngeal pouches. And I've mentioned that in the Mechanisms of Evolution lecture that I gave. It's recorded on here. I talked about how we look at embryological development to show how similar things are. And I had the chicken embryo and the human embryo. And I talked also about, you could look at a fish embryo. And what you'd see is you'd see these pharyngeal pouches in all 3 of us. Okay. And that in the fish, those develop into gills. Okay. And also in the amphibian larva, you're going to see those developing into gills. But in other vertebrates, you only have them as embryos, and then they change into other things as the vertebrate develops. In humans, those become our eustachian tubes, tonsils, thymus, and parathyroids. Okay. Previous lecture, I think I just said became our thyroids and other glands. Okay, in the neck area. Here's the list of 4: eustachian tubes, tonsils, thymus, and parathyroids. Okay. So yes, invertebrate chordates, our first grouping. So like I did with plant kingdom on the board, you can do that with animal kingdom too. You go through and you can have the first, group them out by coelom, and then underneath coelom, for like the true coelom, you can group them out with protostomes and deuterostomes, and then under deuterostomes, you can group them out over, uh, the phyla. But then in this last phyla here of chordata, you'd have to say you could have 2 groups of invertebrate, vertebrate. Okay, so the flow chart here, it gets a really branching tree, okay, or cascading chart. So we have chordates that will never have a backbone. They're just going to have that notochord. And so our first example of an invertebrate chordate is what's called a tunicate. And a common name for these are sea squirts. They're ocean floor dwellers. They have this little thick-walled squat sac with incurrent and excurrent siphons, sounding a little bit like a mollusk there. Okay. No shell. Okay, just this little sac. Has numerous gill slits. They're retained in adult for filter feeding, and the larvae have 3 chordate traits. I tell you, actually, what the adults of these remind me more of is our sponge. Go back to our porifera, which I think had incurrent and excurrent siphon as well. And it just sits there and feeds instead of through pores. It's gill slits that filters stuff, food out of the water. So as an adult, this thing doesn't at all look like it belongs in this category. Okay, it's something weird, but its larva has all 3 chordate traits, and then loses them for some weird reason. Okay, so that's uh, that's why it's in this category. It is the I think probably the weirdest that I know of, which I won't say I know all possibilities here for sure, but this seems to be the weirdest example of a chordate of all of these. Okay. Lancelet is also an invertebrate chordate. It doesn't look so weird. It looks like a little minnow fish or something. It's more like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see this being a chordate. What they do is they bury themselves in coastal water and they filter feed with anterior mouth and gills exposed. Okay. And they retain all 3 chordate characteristics as an adult. Muscles will show segmentation, and they have a dorsal hollow nerve cord that's branched, and they really look more like a small chordate. Vertebrate just doesn't ever get a backbone. Okay. So, and that's a subphylum. Invertebrata is a subphylum. This is our vertebrate chordates. These are going to have backbones or vertebrae, and that's a subphylum of phylum Chordata. Okay, so two subphyla. So these are all going to have the chordate features, but as stated previously, the notochord is going to be replaced by a backbone, a vertebral column. They have a jointed endoskeleton, and there's some characteristics of that endoskeleton, and those are not things I will ask you in the test, but you can see them and you can see how they are related somewhat in structure function to the exoskeleton. It's just it's internal now. General features, 2 pairs of appendages originate from pectoral and pelvic regions. Okay. Equivalent to our arms from the pectoral area and legs from the pelvic area, but all animals are going to have, 4-legged animals will still have the 2 pair, okay, from one from the what's considered pectoral and the other from the pelvic. Okay, so arms, whether you call it arms or legs or 4 legs, it's the same basic structure. High degree of stabilization. We definitely know where heads are in these organisms because complex let me try that again. Complex sense organs are all going to be located close to each other as far as like eyes, nose, mouth, sound receptors, ears, basically. Okay. Complete digestive tract and a large coelom, closed circulatory system, excretory system with kidneys, and reproduction is usually sexual and by separate sexes. So fish. We have 3 living classes of fish. Fossil record includes that, or includes, leads to the understanding that fish probably were much more diverse in the past than we have today. We have a lot of evidence for possibly other classes that no longer exist. Excuse me. So that's why that's worded that way. Okay. Agnatha, Chondriichthyes, and Osteichthyes. Okay, ichthys. Ichthys means fish. That's Greek. Okay. It's Ichthus. Okay. So ichthyes is the derivative off that for the class name. Chondra has to do with chondroitin, and that is what cartilage is made out of. Okay, so these are your cartilaginous fish, and osteo is bone. So these are bony fish. Cartilage fish, bony fish. Chondroitin fish, bony fish. Okay, and agnatha are just strange. Cool, but strange. Jawless fish. I have 63 species of jawless fish. They lack jaws. They have no fins or scales. They look kind of like snakes. Their example is a hagfish. That's a scavenger. It feeds on dead fish in the ocean. I don't have pictures of any of these, but seriously, if you want to see some interesting and strange looking things, just Google pictures. Okay. The lamprey, usually referred to as a lamprey eel. At least every time I see it, that eel is usually stuck on there. I think I read somewhere that that's not an accurate name for it, but anyway, it's uh, that's why lamprey is by itself is I think more correct. I don't know. Anyway, it's a parasite. Like it looks like a water snake. Okay. It has this round mouth that's a sucker, and what it does is it taps into the fish circulatory system. So both of these are they live off other things. The hagfish live off things that are dead, and the lamprey is going to live off of living fish. Okay, as a living um, fish. So that's the agnatha. I have 63 species of things like the hagfish and the lamprey. So our cartilaginous fish is a larger group. Okay. Uh, the internal skeleton is composed of cartilage. Okay. Instead of ossified bone. Okay, we have just cartilage. Cartilage is what we've got. Cartilage is what your ears are made of. Your nose. You got a bone in your nose too, but the end of your nose is flexible, and your ears are flexible. That's cartilage, but yet it's rigid. It keeps a shape. It keeps a form. Your ears have a definite shape and form, even though they flex a little. Nose too. Okay, so these animals all have that for all of their bone structure, not just some peripheral things, and so it gives them a definite shape and some support. Okay, but it's kind of flexible. We have cartilage other places in our body too, inside. It cushions around joints, especially like the knees, hips, and things. So uh, it's other places, but that's where you can really see it. Obviously, is the nose and ears. Okay, so in this grouping of fish, we have sharks. Um, and that varies from your hammerheads to whale sharks that just float along filtering zooplankton. Those are kind of little protists and other smaller single-celled animal, or not single-celled, that'd be the protozoa. Simple multicellular marine life that's in some of those 25 phyla we didn't talk about. Okay, so smaller animals, but tiny, microscopic, small animals. Okay, that's what they eat. Raisin skates that are very flat, in general for their body structure are in this grouping as well because they have that cartilaginous skeleton. And they typically spend their time buried in sand, kind of waiting for clams to come by. So you just, you know, come out and surprise them and get their food that way. Osteichthyes are bony fish. And these are the fish that you're most likely to think of when I say the word fish. If you think of any fish, it's probably going to be this. Chances are the fish you keep in your aquarium, if you've got an aquarium, belong to this category. The fish we eat, generally speaking, most examples are going to be in this category. They secrete or reserve gases from an air bladder, and that allows them to adjust their buoyancy. So they can swim shallow, they can swim deep, and yeah. And the ray finned fish is a specific grouping of the bony fish, and that is definitely our most common sporting fish, food fish that we think of: perch, salmon, trout as examples. It can go on, the list can go on. Things that have fins, the fins are supported by the bony rays. So if next time you catch a fish and you skin it for eating it, you fillet it, look at those fins, and sometimes the little bony rays will project out beyond the edge of the fin. You can poke yourself pretty good uh, on those. Okay, depending on the fish variety, some of them aren't as sharp as others. Um, and seems like it's been a little while since I've been fishing, I'll have to say. But I'm thinking perch, as I recall, um, have some little sharp edges on some of their fins. So usually to me, I think it's the dorsal fins that are more rigid. The pectoral or the ventral fins on the bottom don't usually seem to have that. But those are your ray fin fish. They are bony fish, osteichthyes. Okay. And our fish are going to reproduce by spawning, where sperm and eggs are shed into water at the same time. Uh, it's all kind of by chance. And whether a sperm and an egg is going to meet up. When it does, the zygote then develops into a larva, and you get little minnows developing, and they grow into the adults, and that's fish. Back to evolution out of the sea. I think there's a second part of the article. Okay, talks about somewhere around 430 million years ago, plants colonized. I don't know where the "and" comes in there from. Colonized the bare earth, creating a land rich in food and resources, while fish evolved from ancestral vertebrates in the sea. Okay, so I think it's been a little bit since I've read that article too. I think if you look at that article, it's going to kind of put the timeline here at about the same time period. And one of the things that it begins to talk about in that article, if I remember right, is how some fish have uh, developed fin structures, so these bony fish in particular, right? Fin structures, bony fins that allow them to use those fins to push against surfaces. And some of those use those in the water, but some of those also were used to push themselves out of shallow areas, okay, as water receded during dry seasons, to push them out of shallow areas where they could get trapped in the mud, uh, back into the deeper water. And eventually even some could get from one puddle to the next. Okay, they could leave a puddle and kind of push themselves, walk, so to speak, across a muddy area or just even land uh, into a larger puddle that maybe wasn't drying up like the one they were in, but actually a pond or to a larger lake. Okay, or stream. And so we look at that and say, well, that's the beginning of using these appendages for walking on land. Okay, but it was another 30 million years before we see that being a permanent feature. Okay, something that I mean, I shouldn't say permanent feature, but where it was being used for land locomotion more than just getting from one wet spot to another. Okay. And that begins the terrestrial animal life that is the lineage that, like I said, what leads to us today. And so amphibians are kind of that intermediary group, descendants of some of those first intermediates that have kept close contact with the water, but still on land too. So we have frogs, toads, newts, salamanders. They have distinct walking legs for land locomotion. They have 5 or fewer toes. We start to see the 5 pattern. Uh, and here, though, the lungs are inefficient. Uh, they have to, they do function as lungs, but gas exchange is still through skin a lot. Okay. So that skin, just like what I was talking about, the earthworm skin has to stay damp, moist, so they can't get too far away from the water. They can't dry out or they'll suffocate. Um, and some of them will breathe, like frogs do this, breathe by forcing air from the mouth into the lungs. Okay, so seems like there's something more I was going to say about those. Let me think here. Yeah, it'll probably come back to me as we get a little further along here. Okay, so class Reptilia, turtles, alligators, snakes, and lizards in this group. Sorry about the screaming in the background. Girls are home. We're all in the coronavirus quarantine thing, and I think they were working on schoolwork at one point, but I'm not sure. They may have taken a break. That or they're really excited about their schoolwork. Could be. Okay, back to this. Class Reptilia. Just if that's disturbing you're curious about, I thought I should explain. Turtles, alligators, snakes, and lizards are in this group. Here are all the reptilian characteristics. Oh, wow. Uh, you can read those. What would be on the test to point out to you here? Well, sometimes I will focus in on some stuff about heart. Um, Two atria. Okay, it's kind of where we start to see a heart with chambers, beginning of chambers. Okay. Um, Previously, just like you had some type of organ that just kind of pumped fluid, pumped the blood through the body. Okay, like our aortal arches. Okay, in the earthworm, they're just pumps. There were no separations. We weren't worried about getting rid of returning bad gases and getting in the good oxygen into the new blood as much. We start to see an attempt at that here. It's not a complete separation, so not completely efficient. In that some of the uh, waste gases, like carbon dioxide, is going to be pumped back through the body along with the new stuff. Okay, all right, along with the oxygen-containing blood. So that's, like I said, it's incomplete. It's not we'll consider it efficient, but it works. It works. It's worked for a long time for reptiles. So internal fertilization. So unlike fish, where we've got just the egg and sperm are spread out in the water and what happens happens, here we have uh, a penis it will pass the sperm directly to the female, and that eliminates reliance on water for fertilization. Okay, that's a big step. That's a big step in evolution. It allows animals to get totally away from the water, dependence on the water. Okay, and with lungs, okay, well-developed lungs, we don't have to stay in the water to be moist, so we have gas exchange going on that way. Okay, so though that gas exchange with the blood here may be still a little incomplete, being able to take in oxygen and from the air and process it and not rely on any part to diffusion through the skin, again, big step. Now we can live well away from water. Okay. Might obviously have to drink water, have to travel to lake, stream, pond, large puddle, something to get water, um, for hydration, but don't have to live in it. Don't have to stay close enough to, you know, swim in it and dampen ourselves every so often, so that we don't dry out, that type of thing. It's not needed anymore. Reproduction, we don't need it for reproduction. What is used though is a leathery shelled egg. Okay. And again, that removes the young from having to be in water. Okay. They can stay in that egg until they're developed to the point where they can walk, have their terrestrial locomotion ability. And that means the larva doesn't have to swim around in the water as it develops. Okay. So one more step of getting away from the water. Okay. Being totally terrestrial. These are cold-blooded, and what that means is that they don't maintain body temperature by having a high metabolism. They have cellular metabolism, cellular respiration. They have very kind of a low metabolism. So they're going to regulate their body temperature by exposure to the sun. And so you find these laying out in the sun a lot, soaking up the sun, enjoying the sun. When it's winter or colder time, you're going to find them crawling into a hole or protected area, cave, something to make sure the body temperature doesn't drop below uh, too far. Okay. Class Aves is the birds, and these have feathers, and that's unique to birds. Thought to be modified reptilian scales. I know I've talked about that in this class previously. Not sure, don't remember exactly what detail I went to with that, but the DNA sequence for a feather and the DNA sequence for a scale is very similar. It's like, and it's been a while since I've read about that, but I think it's one protein difference. Could be a few proteins instead of just one, but as I recall reading it, it's like one protein makes the difference between these two. They're very close. Okay. So that's the question of what came first, the scale or the feather. And I'm pretty sure when we talked about the day the Mesozoic died and dinosaurs, I think we talked a little bit about that. That now genetic DNA evidence being recovered from dinosaur fossils indicate that the dinosaurs probably had feathers, or at least T-Rex was probably feathered and had hollow bones, much like a chicken, because the DNA sequence that they extracted for the bones is very close to matching a modern day chicken. Uh, and so it changes the whole idea of T-Rex now. Instead of this huge lumbering creature that you could probably feel, coming at you, half a mile away, now it becomes a very fast moving large thing that might actually be able to sneak up on you. And I don't know, I think that's more terrifying. It's like a velociraptor as opposed to Godzilla, but about the same size. And horror film wise, it's like wow. And somewhere I read that they think the feathers were brightly colored. It's like it just gets scarier as we go, more terrified as we go. Brightly colored makes it at least easy to see coming at you, but if humans were around at that time, which no evidence really supports that, that's been supported anyway. So just but in our movies and our stories, we like to what if and Jurassic Park and all of that. So anyway, what's scary? Yeah. Um, so back to birds. They're related. Okay, evolutionarily, feathers and scales came from the same, uh, basically the same sequences of DNA. Okay, just a change occurred there to make the difference between the two. And then, yeah, which evolved first? Okay, probably the scales on the reptiles, but yeah, if modern day reptiles are descended from dinosaurs and dinosaurs had feathers, then that implies that the feathers came before the scales. And so, yeah, and I've read some discussion on that, and I don't know that there's a. I think the main thought is that actually the scales were here first. But anyway, uh, birds, the front legs form wings. Okay, and then the back legs are what we think of as legs. And they're specialized. The hind legs are specialized for perching, killing prey, tearing prey, swimming, uh, depending on the type of bird. Okay. Um, obviously your waterfowl are going to be modified for swimming. They have the paddle type feet. And your raptor types, the hawks and eagles and owls and things, they're going to be more of the killing and preying, the talons, as we call them, okay, type legs. Here's where we see a four-chambered heart that is separated. The chambers are distinct from each other, and they're going to efficiently separate oxygenated blood from deoxygenated blood. So this is what I was talking about, blood that doesn't carry oxygen but does maybe carry with it the waste gases are going to be in one part of the heart, and that's going to be separated out and exhaled, whereas the blood being pumped out of the heart is going to not contain those anymore and going to have the oxygen that's been breathed in uh, saturating that blood and being carried in the red blood cells, okay, throughout the body. And we don't have this blood containing carbon dioxide being pumped back around again because it just didn't get separated out the first time around, so it's got to go around again. We don't see that here. Okay, so that's where first place we don't see that. Okay. Well-developed brains, excellent control in flight, instinctual behaviors, warm-blooded. Okay, so the reptiles were cold. Here's our first category, our first phylum or class. These are classes of warm-blooded, and that means that they've got a high cell metabolism, so cellular respiration generates heat, and it does enough heat to keep the body at a pretty high temperature, and then feathers provide insulation to help keep that body temperature, help keep that heat, maintain that heat next to the body, and keep the body warm. And the last class, the last phylum and the last class is class Mammalia, and this is us. This is where we belong. And we have hair, and well, we don't have as much hair as all the other mammals do. And as I've mentioned before, with our Telltale Telomere Lab, we are classified biologically as a member of the great apes, and we're called the hairless apes because compared to the others, we're pretty hairless. we have some hair, but not a lot. And so we don't have a lot of insulation against cold naturally. So we are adaptable. We wear clothes, and things like that. But that's the other animals in class Mammalia don't have to worry about that. They've got they either live in warmer environments or they have a lot of hair, a lot of thick, heavy coat to allow them to live in cold climates. Okay, we are of course warm-blooded, as for same reason basically as the birds, high cell metabolism. We have efficient respiratory system, and the thing that makes our class different from the others is we have mammary glands, and thus the name mammal. And mammary glands produce milk to help nourish the helpless young. Our young are some of the probably most helpless of the classes of animals. Not all, but most mammal mothers develop young in a uterus. Okay. An example or an exception to that is going to be the monotremes. These are mammals that actually do still lay eggs externally instead of keeping the young inside and developing a fetus. Okay. The outside of an egg, not from the egg, but not enclosed in the egg. The duck-billed platypus, with that, the female incubates eggs in a burrow in the ground, and then when the eggs hatch, the young is not yet fully developed, and they're going to lap milk that seeps from glands on the abdomen. Okay, both males and females, both genders produce milk in this particular group. Okay, both have functioning mammary glands. Oh, and just a little curiosity here. Platypus, by the way, the plural is not platypi. Okay, I know it's octopi, hippopotami, we always let this, but this one is, the plural is platypoid. Okay, platypoids is the plural. I know, it's weird. Look it up. Okay. Marsupials. Marsupials give birth to premature young that are going to then crawl into the pouch and will um, uh, attach to a nipple to obtain their milk and they continue to develop there. Okay. Um, and I'm sure as I described that, the thing you were thinking of was a kangaroo. Okay. But in North America, we have a marsupial that we don't think about. It's called the opossum. And with the possum, the pouch is actually on the back of the animal. You find the possum carrying the babies around on their back, um, and it's a little bit. Well, what I've seen, it's a little bit more of an exposed pouch. I'm not an opossum scientist or expert, but from what I've seen, it's a little bit more of an exposed pouch than the kangaroo. The kangaroo, the little, it's called a joey, just goes cold, totally in, and you might see little head and ears popping out, but it's the whole body is completely contained in the pouch, and I don't see that with opossums. It seems like the babies are kind of hanging on, partially. There's not really much of a pouch for containing the whole body. Koala bear, um, yeah, I can't speak to anything about the pouch on that one. Okay, I have not studied koalas at all. Placental mammals. Uh, this is the vast majority of mammals are placental mammals. Don't lay eggs, don't have pouches. We just develop young in a uterus, depend upon a placenta to exchange nutrients, oxygen and waste between the fetal uh, and maternal blood. Okay. Uh, and then the offspring will be born uh, usually pretty helpless and have to be nurtured, okay, for a while. But yeah, no egg, no pouch. Okay. Uh, Adapted, okay, back to kind of all mammals. Adapted to life on land, have well-developed brain, four-chambered heart, a diaphragm that aids in breathing, uh, maintain a constant internal temperature. It's kind of a repeat of some of that first slide stuff that I um, gave you. And I guess that's because this is really the kind of the closing comments here. Within class uh, Mammalia, we have orders. So kingdom found class orders. Wow, getting you down really more specified into our classification kingdom here, classification of below kingdom. We have some orders. We have Chiroptera, which is bats, Parasadactyla, which is horses, uh, Cetacea, which is whales. Whales are mammals. Okay. So wait, she mentioned whales back there with those chondrichthyes. No, I didn't. That was called a whale shark. Okay, it's a shark that people think has kind of an appearance to whales. It's called a whale shark, but that's not a whale. A true whale is a mammal. Okay, it's a placental mammal. Rodentia is mice and carnivora dogs. So this is just an example of five different orders within this phylum. Uh, and within the class. And I give this to you so you can see the diversity within class Mammalia. We've got something that flies, but it's not a bird, bats, horses, large land animal, whales, large marine animal, mice, little small thing, dogs, something you're really familiar with. Okay. Um, all right. And that's it. That is the end of the animal kingdom.